I love you so much that if you knew what was in my heart for you, I think you'd be shocked. I care about you. Even if you hate me or don't like me, that doesn't matter to me at all. I love you, and I really, really want the best for you. And that's what motivates me to create the video that we're creating today. We're here in the Redwood Forest, one of the most beautiful places in the entire world. I hope that when you see this video today, you'll be encouraged to come and visit here. It's an important place to come and visit, in my opinion. And we're going to be shooting today into a video on the topic of how the stories that you've been told, the societal conditioning, the myths and fairy tales that you've been told have distorted your perception, have robbed you of your power. I believe that you are about a 2 or 3% version of what you're capable of becoming. And I believe that stories, specifically stories and fairy tales, societal myths, social conditioning, narratives that you've had pounded into your head have robbed you of an incredible life. So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down some of those stories, and I'm going to be showing you the commonalities of why these stories exist. We're going to be breaking down why it is that people or different dark forces would create these stories to suck energy and life from you. And once you see those commonalities, I hope that what's going to happen is you're going to be able to walk down the street and speak with anybody and see how those stories are affecting them. But more importantly, I think that you're going to be able to look at yourself, your own life, and see how different stories have robbed you of your potential. In the process of this, I'm going to encourage you to create new stories, stories that empower you to be at your best and to hit your potential. And so as you live the rest of your life, you're able to see different stories coming at you and how they're meant to dupe you and trick you and condition you to be a fraction of what you're capable of becoming, but also to be able to create these new stories so that you can take yourself to your fullest potential. Whenever I make a video, I think to myself, how can I make something really unique? I don't just like to give the same generic cookie cutter self-help advice. I want to give something that is very unique to my life experience. And I want to share with you a perspective that would be almost impossible to get anywhere else. Now, in doing so, this is not going to be a video with a quick, simple tip. This is going to be a very complex video that's really ideally should last with you for a couple months. This should be changing what you're thinking about for several months after you watch it. This should change everything for you. What we're going to be doing is unpacking the social matrix on a really freaky level, and we're going to be basing it as our starting point based on weird things that I learned from years of coaching people with their social skills. So from many, many years of coaching people with social skills, they would come to me and they'd say, Owen, can you help me with my dating? And usually when I'd help them with dating, they would have a story. And that story that they had in their head was basically that if they wanted to meet an incredible romantic partner, what they should do is they should be very, very low status. They should be meek. They should be subservient. They should be very needy. And typically they would label this as romantic or as being a suitor. But in effect, what it was to act low status. It was to act or to be low self-esteem. It was to put the other person ahead of themselves. And it was to be really, really available. Basically, the myth they have in their head, the story rather, is that they should be just completely available, put the other person first, subservient, low status. And what would happen is that because they believe this, because they would believe that they would get a reward for this, they would take on those behaviors and it would loop in their minds. And it would become this sort of self-induced hypnosis where they're looping on it and looping on it and looping on it. If they could just show that person how much they care and how much they'll make an exception for them by being very low status and needy and putting them first, putting them above themselves, that would somehow get the reward they want of finding love. Now, what we see is that when this fairy tale in the mind occurs, it actually changes them on a core level. I think this is something that gets ignored. This is ignored. We're not looking deeply enough at this phenomenon because the story that they've heard is actually changing their hormones. It's changing them from having a more, let's just say as an example, I don't understand this fully, but just as a rough example, it's changing them from being testosterone focused to being more estrogen focused. Or it's changing them from their brain neurotransmitters having serotonin, GABA, acetylcholine, dopamine, and being kind of jacked up in what we call a winner effect, where when you feel like you're winning, just imagine any time where you just feel like you're completely winning and things are going awesome. Think how you feel. And what it would do is it would actually deprive them of those brain neurochemicals and cause them to walk around kind of in a stupor, where when they see the person, they feel nervous and they've lost their center and they're kind of half out of it. They can't think of what to say, right? When you can't think of what to say, what does that mean? That means that your brain neurochemistry has been messed up. You can't even access the full aspect of the potential of your own mind. Now, we tend to take this for granted, like, well, you know, the person's a little nervous. Well, that's a pretty big deal. I mean, that means that you can't even access your own mind when you're around that person. What's going on there? That's changing you on a hormonal level, on a brain neurotransmitter level. It's changing your actual potential. Pretty crazy to think about. Now, what I would have to teach them is that we have to come up with a different story. And that story is when you put yourself first initially, not in the longer run in a marriage and raising children and when the person has earned their way in with you, but initially putting yourself first, being high self-esteem, having high status behaviors, having your own purpose and passion and friends and things that you love and are excited about. That's what works. It's the exact opposite of the story of what's been told. The story that you've been told is put your focus all on one person, be in scarcity. Whereas we'd have to make a new story saying, no, meet a lot of different people, be in abundance, and then what happens, that kind of builds your own inner foundation so that you're not needy, and then it makes you more attractive. It makes people drawn to you. So let's look here very closely at how there's a self-induced hypnosis. I want you to really think about the self-induced hypnosis. The reason why is because later in this video, we're going to look at where this is happening everywhere in society. So I need you to understand this concept of a story that's causing a self-induced hypnosis. So what's happening here? What the story does is it provides a context or meaning for what it is that you're experiencing, and that will dictate what you decide to focus on and kind of loop in your mind and the trance that you're going to hypnotize yourself into. So if you believe that when you see somebody who you like and are attracted to, that you're experiencing love, and you think that you're going to get rewarded by being low status and needy and subservient and not a challenge at all and way too available, if you believe that, then you're going to hypnotize yourself into that by having all your focus on the one person, and it's going to cause your testosterone to drop. And again, I'm not clear on the hormones here, but you know, someone can fill me in the exact hormone, but it's something like that. Just the general idea of this is going to change your testosterone, change your brain neurochemistry, and what's going to happen is you're going to feel that. You're going to feel needy. You're going to feel low self-esteem. You're going to feel desperate. You're going to feel pathetic. But the narrative that that's love, which to me that's not love at all. I think that's actually creepy. But the narrative that that's love, that's going to cause you to think that you're on the right path. Oh, it's good. It's good that I feel this way. That's a good thing. And it gets to the point that you even get addicted to it. You don't want to give it up. You're actually afraid at a certain point of going back into feeling your natural testosterone, your joy, your confidence, being jacked up. You want to feel in that kind of half out of it need and just chase the other person. You want that. You don't even want the cure. I could give you the cure. You don't even want it. You just want to stay in that subservient point because there's a story, and that story has fed you this idea that it's good that you feel that way. You're looping on it. You're hypnotizing yourself. It is so crazy how this occurs. So what's funny is I would coach people out of this. I would coach them to go and meet new people. And eventually they'd actually crawl out of it. They'd have to start going out, meeting new people, and they'd wind up changing the constitution of their body, of their brain, and they'd hit their potential. And what would happen usually is about 8 or 9 months later, they would meet somebody new, and they would be so sold on that story. They're so sold on it. They're so addicted to that story. It's been embedded into them on a cultural level for so long that after a lot of success being single, meeting new people, getting out there, spreading joy, spreading positivity, being awesome, they want to go back. they'd say, no, I just want to go back. I just want to go back to feeling like this. I want to feel like this. I want to feel. Now look at this. I want to feel love. I just want to feel real love. But what they think is real love is desperation, is pathetic. Real love is very different. I mean, we could make a whole different talk about what real love is, but it's certainly not being needy and low self-esteem and desperate and putting somebody ahead of yourself. Now, I want to be clear here. Let's make the distinction between a long-term partnership where you've got to take care of children and you want to be very kind to your partner. But there's also a difference between kindness and consideration, which I am not speaking against at all. I think that's beautiful, versus being needy and pathetic. And you really have to be honest with yourself about when you're becoming needy and pathetic, because you're not going to be honest with yourself about it, because the story is going to trick you. So what we have to ask ourselves is, where does the story come from? Why does the story exist? What's that about? It's weird to think about, right? Why do we have this random story that messes us up? And I've talked about this in other videos, but I believe that our minds get psychologically attacked and dominated by external forces that essentially want to deplete us of our potential so that other outside forces from us can gain from our loss. And I believe there's truly transcendent paradigms where we can find win-wins, but I believe that we have to understand these paradigms before we can move into that. So here's what happens. You have two different angles that you're getting hit with. One is what you'd call, and I've talked about this in other videos, collectivist conditioning. Collectivist conditioning is to where people who want to make sure that society benefits will put conditioning into society that they believe will help to stabilize it. So what are some of those elements of collectivist conditioning that you might see? Well, right off the bat, they want social stability. They want to see family stability. I think that's actually a good thing. That can be positive. The problem is I think it goes wrong, but they want to have family conditioning. They also want to make sure that people are taken care of in older age. So whether that's a couple stays together for life, great. But if they don't, they ideally want a good settlement in divorce, and then for both people in that relationship to be taken care of for the rest of their life, so it's not a burden on society. So we see a lot of that. There's also other elements to this collectivist conditioning. Some people have argued that kings in the past wanted to have multiple wives, and so what they do is they would teach everybody to take only one spouse, not multiple spouses, but one spouse. And so essentially it was a social conditioning that kings use. Other people have actually said that lower status people would actually want to make it where everybody was in individualist pairs because they didn't want to make it where one person had everybody else. So there's a bunch of different books and theories on this. There's different reasons why people think that this conditioning could exist. There's a number of different reasons why it could exist. And you don't need to fully understand it, but I think that at least having some kind of general understanding of this conditioning is valuable. Okay, so that's collectivist conditioning. Now, you're getting hit from one side there. Now, how about marketers? One thing I could tell you, I'm a marketer myself, what we're taught in marketing school, okay? And I'm going to teach you everything I know about marketing. Let me be clear here. I've been marketing for years. I've got a lot of experience marketing. I'm going to teach you over the next several years everything that I know about marketing. I'm so excited to teach that to you. So I'm going to show you something that marketers learn now. Now, by the way, I don't do this, but I'm taught to do this. I just ignore it. I probably suffer from it, but I ignore it. What I'm taught if I go to a marketing class is don't argue with the client. Don't argue with them. And the reason why is because you want to pander to their existing beliefs. And look, think of it this way. If you have $1 million advertising budget and then you burn that to convince people of some whole new thing, you're going to hemorrhage money. You're not going to survive. So what you want to do is you want to provide a narrative that glorifies their existing beliefs and panders to them. Why is that? I've made other videos about it. What we have, in other videos I've talked about this, I call it a yes man society. Ever since we got rid of the king and queen, everybody became like a little mini version of the king and queen. Well, what's the problem with being a king or queen? A king or queen has what's called yes men or yes women or yes people around them. They're just pandering to the king or to the queen. All these yes men, we know this about celebrities. Well, when you have money and you're in a consumer culture, you're essentially like a miniature version of a celebrity. So everybody's just pandering to you constantly. They're not going to question what your opinion is. They're going to glorify your mediocrity, or they're going to glorify problems that you have and tell you that they're good. I mean, just think about people who do music and they're glorifying drug use and partying. They call that YOLO. You only live once, so do a bunch of drugs. Why is that? If you're going to make music and you're like, you make the Don't Do Drugs album and people are trying to party, nobody's going to listen to that. I mean, you might get some audience, but you'll probably get more of an audience by saying, do the drugs, woo-hoo-hoo, you only live once, so logical extension of that, do drugs. I think the logical extension of that is not to do drugs, but, you know, drink up, get crunk, because that's what people are looking for in that mode. So essentially what we have is a yes man society pandering. Well, if the concept of love is be beta and be low status and be subservient, and that's people's general idea of it, then glorify it. Just glorify it, pump it out. So you're getting hit with collectivist conditioning that's looking out for the benefit of society, trying to get you to lower your potential for societal cohesion, but then you also have marketers that are further reinforcing that. Another factor is also just general low vibration energy. We actually get drawn to people that will traumatize us. That's probably a whole other video. Okay, so that's a whole other side to it. But there's a lot going here that's conditioning us on this type of thinking and this story. And this story is being brutally pounded in our head. Where do we see it? We see it in music. I remember being a kid growing up and thinking, why is every song a love song? I would ask that to my parents. I'm like, how come on the radio every single song is about love? Or you'll see it in advertising. You'll see it in movies. And the advertising is so seductive because they show these beautiful, incredible moments. They're so beautiful. You want to repeat that. You see somebody being this beautiful, gentle suitor. And it's so elegant and it just feels right. It feels like home. And you see in a movie, maybe someone loses someone else by alienating them, and then they chase them down the taxi and say, I love you, I love you. And it looks beautiful because it's simple. See, if the movie said, you know what you really need to do? You need to actually go out and meet new people, work on, change your behavior, change your self-esteem, elevate your self-esteem, don't be needy, create your own group of friends, passions, purpose. If they said all that, and to become higher status, that's hard. That's not easy to do. That's incredibly challenging to do. But if they say, just show your love, just tell them you care, be honest, be real. They say that, well, that resonates. That's called a resonant narrative. And what a resonant narrative means is that when you hear it, it just feels right. There's something about it that just feels right, and you can trust it. It's beautiful. And because it's an easier thing to hear, just show them how much you care. That's far, far easier than changing your brain chemistry, your hormones, your habits, your beliefs, your peer group, your purpose, your passions, which is really, really challenging to do. And so for that reason, people get addicted to that story, and their body chemistry is addicted to it. Look, I've experienced this myself where I'll be going out, meeting new people, I'll be having fun, and then I meet somebody I really like, and I've even seen it to where I devolve into acting very low status, very needy, very pathetic, because I think that if the person sees me as the new person that I've worked hard to become, if they see me as that person and they love me, that's not real love. And I'll think, no, they have to love me as the needy version of Owen. Then they really love me. And I've ruined many different prospective, beautiful relationships by doing this, by falling into these really creepy, bizarre, weird habits. What this did was, seeing this, I started thinking, what is the power of a story? And how is that story, in effect, impacting us? And here's basically what I learned about it. This is, I think, the biggest tree out here, by the way. It's thick. So what you have is to where, I remember as a kid, because I started thinking back, I started thinking to myself, what are other stories that I bought into? I started to think about that in great, great detail. And one that really came to mind, funny enough, was I thought back to when I was a kid. And as a kid, I was very depressed. I had attention deficit disorder, and I was failing in school, and I was essentially a social outcast. And so finally the teachers came to me and they gave me a story for how to think about me being a social outcast, having ADD, being depressed. They said, Owen, your brain is actually missing certain chemistry. Your brain is damaged. It's not your fault. Some people have this thing called depression, and having depression, it's a genetic condition, and because of this genetic condition, that's why you're not getting good grades in school. That's why you're a social outcast. That's why you can't focus. Of course, they didn't tell me it was a lot of food intake. They didn't tell me that it was a lot of my home life that was putting me into low vibration energy. They weren't talking to me about maybe different things I'd been exposed to as a baby that could have caused my certain social aspects of my brain to become miswired. That is a very controversial topic. So there was a lot of different things that they wouldn't talk about. But what they would just talk about is that I had this genetic disease, basically that I was a victim. Now, what that did was it provided a story, and it provided a story to where I was a very special person. I was special, and I was special because I was more depressed and had more attention deficit disorder and more learning disabilities than anybody else. And so, again, just like with the love aspect, where you think that you're going to be rewarded for hypnotizing yourself into this kind of stupor, this half daze, I believed that the more of a victim that I was, the more depressed that I was, the more attention I would get. So I can remember in the 5th grade, I failed this one test, and I was really upset that I failed it. And rather than copping to the fact that I failed it, I ran away from home. By running away from home, I just ran around the block, and my parents couldn't find me. And so they brought me to my guidance counselor, and they said, "What's wrong with Owen?" And they said, "Oh, he's a victim. He has learning disabilities. He's a victim." And what happened was that in doing that, they actually let me pass my test. I'd made some errors in the test, but they passed me because I was a special person who was a special victim. What did I learn from that? I learned that the more depressed that I got, the more of a victim that I was, the more attention that I would get, the more rewards that I'd get. So I actually was rewarded for being a victim. So whenever I felt feelings of, again, low self-esteem or depression or attention deficit disorder, what I would actually do as a kid, I want you to listen to this, it's important because we're going to go a lot deeper. What I did as a kid was I trained myself to accentuate them. So I would seek out music that would make me depressed. I would listen to Trent Reznor, Nine Inch Nails, Smashing Pumpkins with Billy Corgan, and a lot of other music that would make me feel suicidally depressed. I would think about suicide, and I would think about about how learning disabled I am. And what I would do is I would loop on this and loop on it. And the more that I was depressed, the more attention that I got at school, and the more that I was rewarded. So I made myself more depressed. And the result of this was, in effect, I trained my brain to be depressed to the point of feeling suicidal. And if I would actually get to the point where I would make myself look suicidal, I would get rewarded by my guidance counselor and my parents with attention, with special exceptions. And I literally changed my body chemistry, my brain chemistry, to the point that it took me well into a decade in my 20s to learn how to not be depressed anymore, because I trained myself into that depression. Now, I had a lot of good reasons to feel depressed. I had a lot of social skills issues that I've talked about in other videos. They're legitimate, but look at how I hypnotized myself. I would literally lie in my bed listening to Trent Reznor, thinking about suicide. Well, it was the same thing with love, right? I would sit there just going, I'm incomplete, you complete me. You might have heard me singing sarcastically in other videos where I go, I hurt myself today to see if I still feel. Focus on the pain. And here's the best line, the only thing that's real, right? It's a self-hypnosis. The pain, because the story that I was given as a victim, as a special, unique victim, that pain was accentuated. Now, if they give me things like Ritalin or Adderall or Paxil or Prozac, well, think of the pharmaceutical industry. They come in, they train you that you're a victim, and then they say, take these pills. Now, I'm not saying that there's not a place for these pills. I don't understand that. Maybe there's people who need them. I don't understand that. But I know in my case, there was a slew of things that caused depression that I wasn't addressing, that the doctors never addressed. You can read a great book called The Ultramind Solution by Mark Hyman that talks about these things. I would urge you to read that book. And I wasn't addressing any of that. They said, just take a pill. Now, here's the best part. Once I had conditioned myself into believing that I was a victim, what happens? We know this from personal development. Victim psychology is the single most damaging psychology. Victim psychology actually trains your selective focus, your RAS. It trains your selective focus to miss opportunities that you could have and to focus on what's wrong. It actually retrains it. It also shuts down your resourcefulness. That's why the first thing they teach you at any personal development course is what? That you're not a victim. Now, even if you are, because I could tell you things about my childhood that would make me sound a lot like a victim, even if you're legitimately a victim, even if you're like the worst victim ever, if you identify as a victim, that will shut down your brain's natural resources to fix the problem. So even the worst victim in the world, no matter how bad it is, the highest priority is to stop identifying as a victim. You can for a minute to chill out, to take a little breather, but you got to get back at it. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck there. So I was hypnotizing myself into being stuck there. Just like how if I had feelings for somebody, I would hypnotize myself into being in scarcity. And look at that, by the way. What do they teach you in marketing? In marketing, you always want to have scarcity. So look at the societal conditioning as far as true love. They tell you that you have only one soulmate. If I'm going to sell you something right now, I've got to show you that it's something very unique and that there's a time limit on it. We know, as a marketer, I'm a marketer. I'm going to teach you all about marketing in the coming years. Everything I know, I'm going to teach you. What's one of the most important things? You have to put a time limit on your offer. If you don't do that, people don't buy it. It's proven. So that being the case, the soulmate aspect, it makes it scarce. You see that? So then what happens, the person's looping on this subservient mentality of being low status, low self-esteem, their hormones change, their brain chemistry change, and then they'll triple down it. They're like, I need to feel this even more. I need to love more. I just need to share more how I feel. Look what they're doing. It's a story. And this is rampant. And what it does, it freaks people out. People legitimately get freaked out. You'll see people copy what they see in the movies, copy what they're seeing on the radio, copy what they're seeing in advertisements, and it freaks the person out who they're trying to be a suitor for. It freaks them out. It scares them. Conversely, if you just go out, you're kind of having fun, you're having fun with your friends, you're joking around, you're meeting people, you've built your foundation up, you're a challenge, you wind up meeting tons of people. But why isn't that story told? It's actually funny to even really think that, why is this love thing hammered on so much? Because you can actually exploit this lever of love to get an entire population, in effect, to hypnotize themselves into being lower status. So this is the foundation that we're looking at here, okay? We've looked at this idea of love, or even as victim culture, and we've seen how this can actually hypnotize people, millions and millions of people, into changing their actual body chemistry and constitution. And what I'm going to be doing now, we've kind of laid this foundation, and it's a little bit all over the place. But I need you again to think about the story, how the story causes you to have a feeling and then to label the feeling, to interpret the feeling, and decide if that feeling is good for you or bad for you. And then if you're going to go further with it, or if you're going to try to eradicate it and move forward to your true potential. The story is feeding that. And what we're going to talk about in this video is how the stories that we hear, in effect, a lot of the most dangerous stories where there's a lot of negative, low vibration energy will attack the most beautiful parts of who we are. These incredibly beautiful parts, the best parts of who we are, love, sharing, protection, integrity. They will attack this negative energy, or people that are looking to manipulate, or collectivist conditioning or marketing conditioning will attack these vulnerabilities and get it to where you can begin to become controlled. Why do we need to get out of this? Because to become somebody who's truly self-developed at your fullest potential, you've got to be at a point where you've taken off these little parasites and created a story that works for you. So in this video, like I said, we're going to be encouraging you to look at stories that do work. So what we'll do now, we're going to go out of my core subject matter. This conversation is out of my core subject matter. It's a little bit outside of my comfort zone as a teacher. And a lot of the things I'm going to talk about are very sensitive. So if it offends you, I want to apologize in advance. This is not a video intended to offend, but this is a video intended to show you how different stories are there to manipulate you. And once you've seen this, you'll begin to see stories coming at you and know if they're there to help you or to leech from you. But you'll also be able to meet people on the street and say, I wonder what stories are running them. What stories are they subservient to? What mind viruses are controlling their behavior? And I want you to get to the point where you can look at somebody and say, oh, just by looking at their energy or how they feel, I can actually see something about them of how they're running. Again, where did I come to this? How did I come to all this? I came to it just from years of going out and watching myself shoot up into this powerful state and then be drawn down. Powerful state and being drawn down. And then what I want to do here is I want to take that and I want to extend it and extrapolate it into many different applications of life. The main thing that you'll notice about people having their stories ripped away from them is they will really go after you. If you attack their story, they go after you. You remember the movie The Matrix when the bad guy actually asked to be plugged back in the Matrix? I believe he betrays Neo and says, plug me back in the Matrix. I don't want to live in reality anymore. I just want to have my steak. I want to be put back in the Matrix. People love their fairy tales. As a kid, we learn about the Tooth Fairy, Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and we think that fairy tales stop by the age of 10. It doesn't. We have many adult-level fairy tales, and people will become extremely, extremely spiteful to the point they could do some crazy negative things if you mess with their stories. So I'm going to mention some here, and if you disagree, I hope we could still be friends, okay? Now, the first one historically is the divine right of kings, and this was the idea that if you were a good person and you had integrity and you were somebody who believed in God and were righteous, you would give your king superiority over you. Now, this is a funny thing to think about because I want you to imagine that you're a king and you want to manipulate your people to listen to you so that you can maintain power. Well, what are you going to say? You're going to tap into religion and you're going to say, I am the king, I'm appointed by God, which funny enough, the media will probably clickbait this and make it look like I'm saying that for real, not as an example, but anyway. I'm the king, I am ordained by God, and then they say, are you a good person? Do you want to go to heaven? Do you care about God? What kind of person are you? There's this show called The Tudors, And the tutors, you'd see him pushing this button over and over, these incredible citizens that are beautiful people, and he would psychologically go after them by pressing on their integrity. Well, what do we see there is a major aspect of these socially conditioned narratives. This is the dark side of it. A sociopath, one thing you'll learn about sociopaths in general, is they will exploit the sweetest, most beautiful parts of you. Those parts of you that are human, that are beautiful, that are sweet, that are empathetic, to a sociopath are a joke and just another place to attack you. Now, if you watch in nature when animals attack each other for food, or in an ocean documentary when fish attack each other, they're not worried about the feelings of the other fish. They're not worried about the feelings of the other animal. And essentially what they're doing is they're looking to exploit any kind of weakness. So a major weakness that we see exploited with things like the divine right of kings is that the king just views the person as a sucker. They believe in this whole divine right of kings. It's something beautiful in them, and they simply view it as a vulnerability. You'll notice this with many of these stories that are exploitative, is that the low vibration energy, the negative energy, is attacking the most beautiful and vulnerable parts of the person. For example, like I mentioned earlier, the topic of marriage, that part of you that says, I want to be a great partner. I want to be amazing for somebody. I want to do my duty as a citizen. I want to be with just one person and not be all crazy running around meeting new people. That part of you, that beautiful part of you, is the same part of you that can be exploited with some of those narratives. It's pretty crazy how this works. Now, that first story that we looked at, the divine right of kings, this has been exploited for generations. And in addition to that, if we want to go even further, is the topic of war or military service. Let's look at that one. Again, falling by that aspect of low vibration energy. It's really trying to attack you in the most beautiful, incredible aspects of yourself. So I want you to think of that aspect of yourself that says you want to defend your country. You want to be of service. You want to make sure that there is safety for yourself and your family. So I remember being a kid, and the first thing that I wanted to do was to become a soldier. My parents would say to me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said, I want to be a soldier so that I could defend my country against the bad people, was how I felt. The most beautiful part of myself that would have sacrificed anything. I wanted to be a soldier. I wanted to die for my country if need be. That was my understanding. Well, what did we learn starting around the 70s, wars such as Vietnam or the Iraq War? I don't understand these wars. This is far past my pay grade to understand these. But there's been a lot of ideas floated that essentially these wars were corporate interests, where somebody running a weapons corporation or oil corporation is sending in these beautiful people to go and fight in order to meet their corporate objectives. Again, whether that's true or not, I don't fully understand. That's not a cop-out, by the way. This is far past my understanding. But I do know that that type of thing is possible, and I do know that that type of thing has happened throughout history. So again, this narrative of you as a powerful soldier and defending your country, this narrative, it causes you to have to submit yourself to all these orders, which in effect turns you beta to some extent, although you're taking on all these alpha characteristics that are heroic. And then from there, you're risking getting shot or getting killed, leaving your family without a parent. And again, it's that narrative which can be exploited. Now remember, we said that there's three main areas that we know that you can be exploited, that causes exploitation. One is individualist interests, like corporate interests, consumer culture. The other is collectivist interests, and the other is general low vibration energy. We could probably come up with more of these. This is not my main field of expertise, but this is just my basic surface level understanding of it. So going from there, we can also see how religion, again, another beautiful aspect of our psyche, can also be exploited. It's pretty unbelievable. So I want you to think about religion for a minute. What does that represent? And notice how it's always the most beautiful things, the most beautiful, treasured things that are the best part of us, which often get exploited, right? Like marriage, like being a good partner, like being with one person gets exploited. So in the same way, let's look at religion. Religion is a part of surrender to a higher power. That higher power that says, allow that higher power to inhabit you so that you can do better things, so that you can make the world better. It's that creative energy that you invite into yourself that makes you be at your truest potential of contribution. It's just something so beautiful. And so again, with low vibration energy, it's sociopathic. It's looking for any vulnerability. And so with religion, what have we seen is many different religious-based wars, holy wars. Low vibration energy, the energy that understands how to destroy, the destructive force on earth knows that it can take something beautiful like religion and it can exploit it to have people go and murder each other and kill each other, or have them give a bunch of their belongings to a religious organization and dupe them out of it. That beautiful part of who you are that wants to be the best person that you can be can wind up being your greatest vulnerability. Think of the millions of people that died for religious wars. or just the degree of manipulation that can take place. We've even seen horrific assaults done by people who are organizing that religion on the most vulnerable members of society. There's been cases of that. It's well publicized. We keep wondering, why is that? Like we said, that negative energy, it's looking for vulnerabilities. So you need to understand the degree to which if you are going with religion, be aware of it. Be aware that it could be the most beautiful aspect of your life, but also an aspect of your life that you could be the most vulnerable. Like with dating or marriage, the most beautiful aspect of your life, but an aspect of your life where the story that you've been told can cause you to become incredibly vulnerable. Now, we can also see the same vulnerability used by corporations to sell incredibly destructive products. For example, the grandmother of my children comes from Mexico. One of the most beautiful women I've met in my life as far as her soul. This woman, when she gives me a hug, this is kind of weird. When she hugs me, she's one of the most pure spirits I've ever met. I can feel love radiating into me. When I was younger and she'd come give me a hug, I would feel so much love radiating into me, I would realize how much I'm falling short. She's also a very religious woman. Beautiful, beautiful soul. Raised an incredible daughter, the mother of my children, who's such an incredible woman, and that's why I'm so blessed to have her as the mother of my kids. So the grandmother of my children that I'm talking about here, she also is very overweight. She's been consuming foods that are part of the traditional Mexican diet. A lot of tortillas that are fried in weird oils and things like that. And another big one down there is Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola, which is loaded with high fructose corn syrup, will actually give free signs away all over the state. You'll drive through entire states where just everywhere, Coca-Cola's plastered everywhere. And when I talked to her husband, I said, she's gonna die. We're gonna lose her if we don't do something. You got to stop her from, eating all the nachos and tortillas and Coca-Cola. And he said, but my grocery man, he wouldn't kill me. And I said, it's not that he's trying to kill you. Your grocery man's not trying to kill you. He just doesn't know what he's serving you. And this is what he struggled with, was that he felt, from his perspective, as though the grocery man that he trusted was giving him products that were poison. But they just kept saying again and again, we're from Mexico, this is what we eat. She said to me, Owen, how is the food that I fed my children poison? And I said, you gotta just stop, please, you've got to stop. And now she's had multiple different surgeries for cancer, and she can't come to visit her grandchildren very often. Again, the most beautiful person that I've met, maybe in my life potentially. My son Dylan looks so much like her, that's a beautiful gift. And exploited on this. Many of my friends that come from Paris, France, all over Europe, in France, they believe in cigarettes. That image of smoking a cigarette by the cafe, just sitting out there puffing a cigarette at some beautiful cobblestone cafe. Who wouldn't like that image? It's an image of being French. So I'll say to my friends, you got to stop smoking cigarettes. They say, no, I'm French. I say, it doesn't matter that you're French. You're gonna die. They say, no, I'm French. It's a part of a national identity. We can see that in many different areas with national identity, how national identity can be connected to with products like our standard American diet. Again, we have different corporations, different collectivist interests, and just general low vibration energy pumping us. They call it SAD, SAD. It's so funny how this works. Like, hello, hello, it's called SAD, the standard American diet. There's so many different corporate interests as far as high fructose corn syrup, extra soy, the 4 food groups. You should study this. And again, who wouldn't want to eat that classic American dinner if you're with your friends? Like, out of the drive-thru, you got a milkshake, got fries, got a burger. When I go to, say, In-N-Out, there's an In-N-Out hamburger in California. When you're in LA, who doesn't want to eat an In-N-Out? You're not in LA till you've eaten an In-N-Out. And it's not that eating a burger and fries and a milkshake one time is going to kill you, but once you've had that fun and it's kind of inexpensive, how are you not going to want to go do that again? You're proud to be from California, living in LA, want to go eat what people from LA eat. Maybe you go to that truck stop burrito. It's awesome. It's a part of national identity. Again, part of that place where our heart is wide open and raw and vulnerable. And they can attach that. We also see this in just general different lifestyles. For example, a lot of, say, rappers will push this kind of YOLO lifestyle. You only live once, YOLO lifestyle. Or say gangster lifestyle or a rock star lifestyle. Let's look at some of those. The gangster lifestyle is one where you're gonna be tough. You go by the G code. And then you wind up going after people. You wind up doing horrible things. You wind up in jail. You see a lot of people in jail, they're trying to live up to a code and they wind up in prison. They think this lifestyle's been glorified. They're representing their block, whatever it is. I don't understand. This is past my understanding. And they'll often come later from prison in this tiny little cell. A cell, I mean, look at this beautiful place that we're in together right now. Freedom. But instead they're in a cell, like tiny, maybe for the rest of their lives, for the G code. Or people who do the YOLO, you only live once, and they're doing drugs, drinking alcohol, wasting their lives away, and saying you only live once. If you only live once, that's the reason not to do that. That's the exact reason not to do that. But you've got a lifestyle being promoted by different entertainers. Why do the entertainers do it? Entertainers do that because they want to get you into party mode. If you're a rocker, or rock star, or rapper, maybe you want to go hook up with the people who you're singing for, who you're performing for. So you put them in this you only live once lifestyle so that they're already in that mode. Funny how that works. Think about it. Where have you bought into that? I've had friends that say that they're living a rock star lifestyle and start using hard drugs on a regular basis. They just say, I'm living the rock star lifestyle. Go look at rock stars. How does that wind up? So think about any lifestyle that's being presented to you, even an entrepreneur's lifestyle. There's a lot of different entrepreneurial videos that talk about just grind it out, grind it out. And where's that going to wind you up if your whole life passes you by, if you don't spend time with your children? There's a good aspect to that. I think any of these lifestyles actually have great aspects. They really do. But what they're doing is they're feeding off the fact that you don't necessarily have a direction in your life. Your life is directionless, or you can't figure out a direction. And then they try to feed you and sell you on a lifestyle. Part of individualistic culture. They want to feed you this lifestyle and glorify it. But really, they benefit. That lifestyle that they're feeding you, they're benefiting from. Your vulnerability of not knowing exactly what to do with your life becomes this huge liability to which then they can move in and control you. Among the major keys here is that ability to control you. And what you're generally seeing is that either A, they push you into a lifestyle to where they can profit from you, B, they push you into dimming your light in some way to serve the collective, or C, they kind of give you that deal with the devil to where you do something that feels good on the front end and then your life becomes completely chaotic. A lot of it is the glorification of being a lesser version of yourself. They'll show these narratives to where they're glorifying you succumbing to the group identity. They're glorifying you being a beta or lesser version of yourself. And this can get to the point where it can result in death because you just run into some situation that gets you killed, in a lot of self-harm, or just walking around in this half derped out state. This is a very, very sensitive topic because, as I mentioned, the areas that are the most treasured to us, that are the most beautiful to us, is the area that low vibration energy, that force of death and destruction is going to exploit. It is sociopathic. You ever seen a movie where the good guy's fighting the bad guy, and then the bad guy somehow transforms into the hero's dead wife, and then the dead wife says, "I love you, I'm here, don't kill me," and because the bad guy is trying to use that most vulnerable place. Low vibration energy is sociopathic. It is dark. It is twisted. Don't underestimate the extent to which it seeks harm. This is why whenever people do these crazed attacks, they go after the most beautiful things like air travel or a big concert or a school. It's going for the most beautiful parts of us. And so understand that you have many different vulnerabilities. And when you're a kid, you're fed these different stories and you don't have access to a lot of information. You don't have access to a lot of different ways of thinking about things. So you'll tend to just gravitate to the stories that you're fed. But as an adult, you need to start fact checking. And if you have too much of a romantic attachment to a particular story, this can wind up destroying your life. But even more so than even just destroying your life, how might it just deplete you? Most of society is people walking around in a half stupor. And that is because they are being psychologically pummeled. There's psychological warfare being done on them by these different stories coming from all different directions. Just like an animal out here in the forest could be getting hit with predators, could be getting hit with all sorts of different forces of nature coming at it, weather, everything. In the same way, you will be getting hit by different aspects of your life and your social life that is basically trying to pull and deplete you. So part of personal development, part of self-development is understanding everything that's on you that's sucking life from you. It is walking down the street, looking at the average person going, why are they in a half stupor? Where's the brightness in the eyes? Why aren't they awake? Why are they concerned with such petty level things? Why are they operating in a coping mode? What's going on? And in effect, there's many different areas that we've covered in the past series of videos that we've been working on. But today, again, we want to really, really be focused on stories. Many of these that are sensitive. I apologize if I've offended you. And like I said, a lot of these stories are the best parts of us. That's why I believe in these stories. I believe in them. But what happens is that we're so addicted to them that we would rather fight or be destroyed or attack somebody else. And the main key here being, as a problem in humanity, attack somebody else who makes our story come into question. So having looked at this and thinking earlier, we've laid the foundation of how, say in dating, you believe the wrong story and you just become this kind of half version of yourself. Then you have some of these other more extreme versions of stories that can literally destroy you. But let's look at that in-between point, like I said, to where it's simply just depleting you of your life's potential. And then let's look at constructing perhaps other stories that could be a lot more powerful. Okay, so I've got a confession to make. I'm probably one of the most egregious marketers on the planet. And what I mean by that is I've been involved with maybe $100 million in sales of digital products and live events in my life in some way connected to it. And I understand marketing very, very well. So I love marketing because I believe in what it is that I have to share and teach. And for that reason, I want to use marketing to the greatest effect that I can. Good stuff, right? When it's a win-win, when it's not a win-lose, right? There's a difference between selling something that's meant to empower people and change their lives versus, say, a weird chemical baby formula being sold to mothers in Africa because they think that their breast milk is not healthy enough, and then they wind up buying the formula from the West, making their kids less healthy to exploit them. Very, very different thing. So I believe in what it is that I have to sell, and for that reason, I study marketing in depth, and I have so much to say about it, and that's why I talk about the conditioning that gets created in marketing. Now, here's a funny thing that I just think that's going to blow your mind. So whenever I'm doing selling from the stage, typically I'm looking to sell well into six figures from the stage. And when I'm doing that, the way that I do it is I talk about a set of ideas. And as I'm talking about the set of ideas, then what I do is after a couple hours of talking about those ideas, I'll present a product or program which is similar or solves the problems of those ideas. So let's say that I've been talking about how to use your voice. I know a little thing or two about using my voice. Okay, I can speak to, say, a 500 or 700 person room without a microphone. I know how to use my voice. It is awesome. So say that I'm selling that. Well, if I'm in front of a room and I'm selling a program on how to improve your voice, and then out of nowhere I say, let's make a program about online dating, I find that the audience gets very confused and buys nothing. I've tested this many different times because you've been talking about how to use your voice and all the advantages and how cool it is to be able to use your voice properly, and then out of nowhere you hit them with online dating. How do I know this? I work with Jeff. You guys know Jeff, if you know Jeff. And Jeff has a program on online dating and he has one on voice. So him and I will be up on stage together and we talk about voice the whole time, and then me and Jeff, sometimes we get our wires crossed, and when I'm selling the vocal program with Jeff, it's his program, but I'm helping him to sell it, out of nowhere he'll be like, and we have this online dating thing too, it's super cool. And I'm like, dude, what are we doing here? They're getting confused. And then I'll get my wires crossed and I'll start talking about the online dating thing. The audience just gets confused and the results are terrible. It's crazy how it works. So I've seen it when I have a channel, a video channel on a certain topic, and then out of nowhere, I try to sell a program that's not related to that channel. This is even a problem you see in social media influencers. They'll take, say, bikini shots, and they have all these different bikini shots. They get 1 million followers, and then they come to me, they say, Owen, can you help me? I've got 1 million followers with my bikini shots. What can I sell? And I say, I got news for you. The only thing that you can sell with bikini shots, I mean, to be fair, you can sell different things, but what has your list been primed for? Your list is looking at you in a bikini. You're probably going to be getting a bunch of different solicitations for things that are highly inappropriate because that's what you've been presenting, and that's what people want to move forward on. Where is this coming from? We just went from talking about these vulnerable topics into raw marketing. That's kind of funny. Here's what I'm saying. If you've been presented a certain story and you have a certain set of expectations, then it can really, really freak you out if some other set of expectations gets presented to you. See, when Jeff is selling his vocal program, and then out of nowhere he talks about online dating, guess what? His online dating program is incredible. That guy put years of research into his online dating program. That program is amazing. But if you weren't presented that, then you're probably somewhat attached to your set of expectations about the vocal thing. I mean, look, I've seen this for years even when I'm teaching. I'll be teaching a program, and then out of nowhere, I have this crazy creative inspiration that I could teach this completely different program that's even better. This is a mistake that I've made sometimes. So I'll present one program. Say that my program is learn different social skills. And then I'll be talking to you and I see that you're carrying all this trauma. And then I switch it up and I start teaching you how to heal your trauma. Well, that same program about healing trauma, I teach that one with Julian, for example. That program is amazing in and of itself. But if you're there to learn social dynamics and out of nowhere, I start shoving down your throat this thing about healing trauma, even though the healing trauma program could well be better and more effective than the social dynamics program, you are going to probably get frustrated because I'm trying to show you how to heal trauma. It's not that the healing trauma isn't as good as social dynamics. It's just not what you're expecting. Likewise, it's not that online dating isn't as interesting as, say, vocal. It's just not what you're expecting. So what happens is that you get attached to your set of expectations. The stories that you've been fed by society, you can question them, you can change them. See, people will get so attached to the story that in effect's been marketed to them. Understand that. These different narratives and ideas, they've just been jammed down your throat by marketers. People who do, in effect, what I do, except they're not there to change your life with some amazing product or program. They're there to cheapen their product or program to as low of a margin as they can, basically, in effect, turn you into a zombie and then just vacuum money out of you. It's a crazy world that we live in. So realize that you can sell yourself a different story. Don't be attached to one story. We talked about the dating one. Let's look at that for a minute. Okay, so you've been sold a story that if you're super duper nice and super sweet and subservient, that people will love you and be attracted to you for it, and that's all you have to do. Well, what if we looked at a different story? How about we said, learn to love your own life, learn to be the hero of your own journey, learn to have incredible charisma. Learn to make life beautiful, amazing. Think of all the incredible things that you could do with your life. And then as you go out and meet new people, you could have all sorts of novel new experiences. And then eventually when you meet someone you like, just still be that confident person that you presented yourself as. And your life could be amazing. Now, by the way, let's bring that back. Look at that one. Just pause for a moment there. I wasn't even planning this one. I just sort of stumbled onto it. Let's think about this in dating. You present yourself as this confident, brash, alpha person. So that's how your partner gets to know you. But then you decide to become this little one-third version of yourself who isn't now just enjoying life, being the cool center of attention at the venue. Now you're just some weird beta, some creep. And then you wonder, when you sold your partner on one lifestyle, then you showed them something else. Well, what did you expect? So notice here, just look at this basic marketing. You've been marketed different stories, and you're attached to them. They were really, really, really good at marketing you these narratives. But unlike a narrative that's designed to be empowering, because a lot of narratives can be very empowering. A lot of lifestyles that you could be sold or marketed on could be very empowering. These are narratives that are messing you up. So if you're that mother in Africa and you've been sold on a narrative that you're providing your child with the nutrition of the West with their horrible baby formula instead of breast milk, if you've been sold on that story, just learn a new story. Simple. You know what? Yeah, I thought that I was doing good for my kids. It turns out that the natural way of doing it could be better. Great. Think about that with dating and relationships. You're sold on this weird Hollywood Disney narrative that tells you that you should act like a Disney character. Why not just go into your natural state? Natural state in any species in mammals is that the high status mammal typically gets the attention from many different people of the opposite sex. We know that. That's just called a natural life of mammals. Is it really that bad? Is it so horrible that this weird lifestyle that you've been sold we could just go back to the natural ways? It's not actually that bad. But again, you've just been sold it. So as a marketer myself, I understand all too well that we are constantly being sold on different narratives. And I understand narratives that are win-win, that are fair, that are high vibration, and that are looking to make everybody have an awesome time. I see that a mile away. But I also see narratives very clearly that are incredibly win-lose and dangerous. And typically, again, coming from a low vibration energy space, these narratives are going to be from your most vulnerable different space. So I think that you're getting a general idea now that you've been sold these different stories. And in the various videos that we've been shooting of late, we've talked a lot about the way in which your energy is depleted, in which there is, in effect, psychological warfare being committed against you. We've talked about that. And what you'll see here is that in the world, there's many haves and have-nots. I think we can see that. And clearly, human beings, part of our ability to be synergistic is what makes us powerful. Human beings, part of what makes us powerful as a species is that we do have that ability to interface with other people. We're not this isolated island. We're more like a permeable membrane being affected by everything around us. We get that. So clearly some people are doing very well in that situation, and some people are not at all doing well in that situation. But the power of togetherness, to me, is one of the most beautiful aspects of being a human being. So what I want to look at, we've looked at this from a lot of different angles, but I would like to look at the general propaganda which, in effect, mass media uses to hypnotize you. And what I would say is this: as a marketer myself, the way that we tend to understand people is a lot like how a parent understands a child. People have a willful ignorance, and they want to stay in their fairy tale. And they get angry when you wake them up. It's like you see your roommate just sitting there sleeping, and you try to wake them up, they go, "Oh, leave me alone! I'm sleeping! I'm sleeping! You woke me up!" They get angry. But I think that if you're watching this video, you're probably somebody who on some level you want to be woken up because you've tried the slumber and the slumber didn't work for you. Let me say this. If for any reason the slumber didn't work for you, and if for any reason you just simply found that this social condition narrative didn't pan out, then be happy that you're going to be forced to wake up. In my case, I was in the socially conditioned narrative, and that wasn't just a narrative, that was a nightmare. Let's be clear on this. This became a socially conditioned nightmare. So I was forced to wake up. I was in the dream, and the dream just went really, really bad. Well, you might be mad about that. Oh, the dream didn't pan out how I thought. You got marketed a nonsense dream. All good. But now you can choose to wake up. And I can tell you this, for me, waking up has been one of the most beautiful experiences of my life. And we're going to have a lot of content coming on what it means to wake up, because we've really tried to cover the nightmare of social conditioning here, because we've got to lay a foundation so that when you wake up, you've got all these leeches taken off of you and you can truly thrive. But what we'll do is we'll wrap up with a basic summary of what I see in a lot of mass scale propaganda, which again is coming everywhere from individualistic cultures like consumer culture trying to exploit you, collectivist culture trying to get you to dim your light, and general low vibration energy. There's typical characteristics of this that when you see it, these stories, honestly, they become a complete joke. Once you know the basic hallmarks of the story, you're like, you gotta be kidding me, they're doing this? Wow. No different than, say, a marketer who understands marketing. You will understand exactly what kind of stories you're being hit with and how to create new stories that empower you. So by the way, I'm a 40-year-old man, but you know, the kid in me, I can't help but, okay, sorry, that's the kid in me, ignore me. So let's go back on different types of conditioning, pros and cons. Let's look at individualist conditioning, the idea of freedom, but let's also look at collectivist conditioning, the idea of compassion. So freedom on one side and compassion on the other side. These are huge and a major, major part of our social conditioning. It's pretty intense to think about this. Okay, so as far as freedom, you have this idea that people should be free. You yourself should be free to live the life that you want. We want to have freedom. I mean, being honest with you, if we were to actually think about my two major hot buttons that are big for me, one of them is freedom. When I think about the word freedom, it puts pretty much like a tear in my eyes. And the other one is compassion, is helping people. This is why when I'm out goofing off with my friends and just speaking freely, having the ability to say what's on my mind and share it without having to filter everything that comes out of my mouth, that's a beautiful thing to me, this idea of freedom. At the same time, the flip side is compassion. I want to help people. And this is massive as well. Now, let's look at how each goes sideways, though. Again, we said that with social conditioning, it's the most beautiful parts of our hearts and soul that get attacked. So let's say that a company, going back to that example we used earlier, decides to market to people who are not as educated as they would need to be to understand that their baby formula isn't better than breast milk. How would they do so? They'd say, it's freedom. They have the choice. The people who buy it have the choice. They've got the choice. They could choose to buy the formula or not. It's up to them. And so what they're doing is they're exploiting their lack of knowledge in order to market them something that they don't understand. In a previous video that I shot at Catalina Island, we talked about the fact that if somebody's involved in consumer culture, the different businesses can psychologically dominate them to the point that they can lower their attention span, get it to where they're eating foods that depletes their attention, and it puts them in lifestyles where they feel very separate and competitive and everybody's the enemy, and that person doesn't know up from down anymore. So this company that is free, that is really trying to engage in commerce, this whole idea of capitalism, this idea that products get better because the invisible hand of Adam Smith is filling in all the gaps that we need in our society, this beautiful aspect of freedom winds up being exploited. So freedom, the single closest thing to my soul, can also be exploited. But let's look at compassion on the other side. Funny how that can work too. So when compassion works properly, it's like I've dedicated my life to building a team of people who could release free videos so we can get a lot of information out for free, and doing free live events all over the planet. That's been my love and my joy. When I run live events, it's not uncommon that I have my client in tears in my arms until 8 or 9 in the morning if needed. Ideally, I'd like to get to bed on time, but if that's needed, I do that. That's called compassion. I've stayed in teaching content that was really not the best idea for me at all, and you think you know, but you don't, I promise you, because I don't talk about that stuff. Really, really, really problem for me, because that compassion in me says, you know what, we got to help people. And this has been the mission of my life. So on one hand, you have freedom. On the other hand, you have compassion. But where can compassion go wrong? Compassion goes wrong, as an example, when you tell a group of people that they're victims. When you go commandeer money from other people and give a handout to those people, you are waging psychological warfare on them because you're saying you're a victim and you should be dependent. Now, I've taught personal development for nearly 20 years. This has been my obsession. Let me ask you a question. And this should be a question that you should really spend as long as you need thinking about until you understand the answer. What self-development program on the earth would tell their clients that they're a victim that should be dependent? What self-development program in the world ever would teach that? Personal development has been an area of study well into 100 years now. People like Anthony Robbins, Napoleon Hill, Maxwell Maltz, Stephen Covey. There's incredible teachers, Brian Tracy, Wayne Dyer, but many other teachers. And in what field of personal development would they tell you you're a victim and tell you that you should be dependent? What is the number one lesson that you learn in personal development? You're not a victim, no matter how much you're a victim, no matter what's been done to you. No matter what's been done to you, do you understand? No matter what, you're not a victim. You can be self-reliant. That's lesson number 2. Lesson number 1 is you're not a victim. Lesson number 2 is you can be self-reliant. So what kind of assault is being done on a group of people psychologically when they're being told that they're a victim and not to be self-reliant? So that's where compassion, like freedom, compassion, the most beautiful part of us, can be used to wage psychological warfare on people. And like we said, the most beautiful part of us gets exploited. Low vibration energy comes bearing gifts. The answer is always education. Always education. Now, I've mentioned this in other videos. There's a space for compassion when somebody is so beaten down, they may need help. They may need to be told they're a victim because they feel so bad. So there's a moment where that makes sense. It's okay to say, hey, some bad stuff's happened to you, you're a victim. For a second, that makes sense. To stabilize things, okay? It's like a body that's bleeding out. You might have to do things to stabilize the body for a second. But for that body to thrive, You have to remove the dependence. So again, we see freedom, this beautiful concept, this part of our social conditioning, can also be used to wage a psychological war on you by lowering your attention span, by getting you eating foods that you shouldn't be eating, by getting you in a concrete jungle to where you're disconnected from nature, getting you continually comparing yourself to other people, robbing you of your self-esteem until you buy certain commercial products, putting you into an education system that trains you to be part of a factory, and so much more. There's so much more that consumer culture does to us. But conversely, collectivist cultures like compassion can also tell us that we're victims and try to make us dependent. Because when you give somebody something too easily, let me tell you something. I've been lucky to have the life that I have, even despite a lot of things that I could tell you things right now that would shock you about my life. Shock you, okay, about how bad it is. But I've had, in my mind, an amazing life. I'm so blessed. Most of the areas that I'm thriving didn't come through anything being handed to me. It usually came through a lot of pain and having to sink or swim. A lot of the things that I've had to do, I never would have learned how to do these things unless I was forced. They were too painful. Most of human beings' development does have to come through struggle. I'm sorry to tell you that. If you go into outer space and there's no gravity, your bones start to thin out. Your muscles need to be stressed in order to grow. So you need that stress. That compassion that on the surface seems so beautiful can be one of the most destructive forces in the world. Destructive. So I've taught self-development for years. I have a pretty sharp understanding of what helps you to grow, what helps you to move forward in your life. You're not a victim and you have to become self-reliant. The answer is always education. It's showing you the ways in which you are being depleted and helping you to plug the holes, helping you to find your core competencies, and helping you to learn about scaling those core competencies. And we can do that. When you hear me talking, joking around, saying I'm an egregious marketer, I'm kidding, by the way. That's because I want to teach you marketing. I want to teach you how to make money. I want to teach you how to be at your best and be at your potential to raise your abilities and to help you to meet that potential. That's why we're laying a foundation right now to show you what's been depleting you, so that you can see what weird narratives are being thrown at you, and so you can begin to see what stories are coming at you so you can start to fix it. So I'm sorry with what happened to you. And I'm sorry if you've been hit with collectivist conditioning, individualist conditioning, and I'm sorry if you've been hit by low vibration energy. Negative, dark energy has taken from me things that I would never, ever even want to fully share. Friends. It's taken a lot. A lot of the happiness that I would have hoped to have had in life, it's taken that from me. But I understand that energy exists for a reason. I understand that that energy controls a lot of the conditioning that's coming at me and you. But we can be a family here. We can help each other. We can come together and help each other with this, to identify what's going on here. And the funny thing is, as dark as this stuff is, look, we're pretty early in the game in modern society here, right? So we're early in modern society. We're still learning what this stuff is. Me, as a teacher, I'm, a little bit on the edge here, right? On the bleeding edge as far as talking about this stuff. Other people talk about it too. But we're trying to break down the social conditioning in detail. Why don't we come together and begin to explore this social conditioning so that we can share what we're being hit with? We can start to understand it. And so that we can see ourselves and society begin to wake up out of its stupor and out of our stupor and be at our greatest potential and give our greatest gifts. So this is one of the most beautiful places that I've ever visited, and I hope that you enjoyed it. One of my goals was to come here to share this with you. And what I'd like to do now is wrap up with the basic hallmarks of social conditioning that is designed to deplete you so that you can see it coming a mile away. And I don't have any perfect utopian view on how society should be. That's not what this video is about. There's going to be many different iterations of society for the duration of the time that this information exists. There's going to be collectivist society, individual society, and all sorts of weird societies that I can't predict or understand. That's not my concern here. My concern is to educate you on different social conditioning, how it's hitting you, and allowing you to parse out the good social conditioning from the bad. Like I said, most of these different social conditionings have good elements, and that is why a lot of negativity can be kind of slipped in there, okay, like a poison pill. So generally speaking, when we're looking at propaganda memes that are meant to attack you, there's a couple main features, and one of them is that it plays on the fact that we don't understand what life is all about. Now, we're sitting here on this earth, and I hope that this force inspires you to realize that this earth has been around a long time. I mean, imagine, an environment like this. Maybe there's dinosaurs roaming around. I'm not clear on that. But just consider the fact that in these types of crazy, wild environments, human beings, I mean, look at the fact that you have canine teeth, sharp teeth. Look at some of your instincts that you have. We're naturally built to be wild. And because we're born into an environment where we don't really know up from down or what the purpose of it is, it's very easy to exploit us by giving us a purpose. The reason why is because the social conditioning is exploiting your existential angst. A buddy of mine, his name's Jesse, he said to me that what we should really do is once a year we should just get together in this big party and just hug each other and cry and say, we're on a spinning rock, we don't know why we're here, rather than trying to pretend as though we know completely why it is that we're here. I have a lot of intuition on that, and I'm going to be sharing that in a future video, but we don't fully know what it is that we're doing here. It's scary. That degree of existential crisis, that burden of freedom is frightening. And as a result of that, whenever somebody will give you a direction or tell you how to think or what to do, it's very easy to kind of latch onto that, because that weakness that's in us, that is afraid of ultimate freedom, that's afraid of not knowing the reason that we're here, it's very, very easily exploited. So that's one element of propaganda that can easily exploit you, is your uncertainty about life and giving you a direction. Now, another one is playing off the fact that you want to signal virtue. So part of our mating dance that we have as human beings is that we want to come across as having status. And so a lot of time we don't really know what is attractive or what's not. We're not conditioned on that. Now, I've spent decades studying what creates attraction between people, and I think that we've got a pretty clear idea on that now. So any attempt to show what actually creates attraction, generally speaking, will be repressed. And we've seen that to an astronomical degree. In fact, even with the internet coming out now, it actually parallels a lot of what we saw with the printing press. The printing press, all of a sudden, the church didn't have a monopoly over, say, language or being able to read, right? Back then it was in Latin, and they had a monopoly over the printing press. All of a sudden, ideas started to spread, and the church would start executing people that were spreading ideas because they want to keep them dependent. We've seen that with the internet, where we had this beautiful golden era of the internet that happened for a while, where free exchange of ideas happening, and now all of a sudden it's like, whoa. No. You're not going to learn the truth. Boom, boom, boom. Not going to happen. We're seeing parallels with that right now with the internet. Funny how history repeats itself. And it'll probably repeat itself with many different mediums of communication, virtual reality, or things like that in the future. We're going to see these patterns happen again and again. So because people don't understand what attraction is, they think that signaling virtue or looking good, looking virtuous and pious is a good way to show status. And oftentimes, because we don't know how to secure a mate, we think that if we signal virtue in some way, that could secure a mate. An easy way to manipulate people en masse is make them think that they can basically what you do is you take an idea such as compassion and you oversimplify it. You strip it of complexity, you strip it of nuance. Don't worry that your compassion could be creating dependence. Don't worry that your compassion could be, in some way creating all sorts of chaos in society. Don't worry about that. Don't even worry about what the larger picture is of what you're doing. Just take the general idea. They basically just strip it of all complexity, and they just dumb it down and say, do you believe in this? Like, do you believe in love? Do you want to spread love? Well, now you can signal virtue by spreading love. They dumb it down. There's no nuance in it. Oftentimes, trying to spread love can create all sorts of chaos. What if we go into a natural ecosystem and we start saving certain animals over others? What if we introduce other species into the ecosystem? It takes the ecosystem out of balance. What if we teach the wild animals here to be dependent and try to domesticate them? What can it do to them? That domestication of that animal can be an assault on that animal. So you're stripping the complexities, but basically what you're having is as a form of social control. You basically have it to where people want to signal virtue by helping, but the people that are following this don't care if what they're doing is actually helping or not. They may care in some loose way. It's more tapping into the unconscious drive to somehow secure a mate. Ironically, the same people that do that are typically the first people that don't secure a mate. It's just so funny. They have no concept of what creates attraction, so they're like, this works, look what I'm doing! And it doesn't work at all. So like we said, the first one, a side of mass propaganda designed to basically be a parasite on you is the fact that you don't know the larger part of reality and it's trying to give you meaning by joining the movement. Or another one is that you don't know, A, you don't know why you're here, or B, you don't even know how to raise your status. So again, they're exploiting off of that lack of knowledge. Now, extending on that lack of knowledge, we have lack of knowledge about why we're here, lack of knowledge about status and mating, but another one is lack of knowledge of energy work, of low vibration energy. I know, wacky, right? So with low vibration energy, essentially, that negative energy is attacking you in your thoughts all the time. And you're sitting there completely exasperated, completely frustrated, having all these negative thoughts. You have what's called untargeted discontent. Say that with me. Untargeted discontent. Now, by the way, part of being in the masses when you're eating bad food, doing a job that is not satisfying, thinking that you're against everybody because the higher reality that we're all one is not presented to you, and being disconnected from nature and basically just being put in a position to be miserable, this creates something called untargeted discontent. This is what creates that kind of pitchfork wielding mob effect that we see in society. So because you're in that untargeted discontent, you're looking for some kind of boogeyman to blame, essentially to scapegoat. Human beings, we call this triangulation. Try going to a friend of yours and just start talking badly on a mutual friend. Typically speaking, because most people have untargeted discontent, they feed off of blaming other people. We see this in political campaigns. Each generation of political campaign tries to blame everybody else because they're feeding off of that untargeted discontent. Now, the way that we often do this is in effect by creating boogeymen and by creating very simplistic narratives. But again, it's that us versus them mindset. We see this where you make another entire group into a scapegoat. We've seen that in World War II, to where that was exploited. You know, people are unhappy, so you scapegoat somebody. A scapegoat, understand that, is disgusting, horrifying, or they blame a particular individual, whatever it is. So be aware of that. So again, we have, like I said, lack of awareness of why we're here, lack of awareness of mating, lack of awareness of what is negative energy that's attacking you and why it's happening, and we can exploit that. Or another one is lack of awareness of how to be within a group. You can actually provide status within a group, and you can motivate people to buy different products, like for example, different styles, different fashions, things like that, just to get status within a group. So again, that lack of knowledge of status, we can also play off of that. Now, the next major hallmark that I've seen is the glorification of mediocrity. And this is also incredibly bad propaganda. This can come from individualistic culture or collectivist culture. It comes from individualist culture to pander to the individual. It is a marketing company, a business saying, we give glory to your mediocrity. Your mediocrity is great. So they'll take things like honest work or real people. They'll say, that's honest work. You're a real person. You're the most important person because you're part of the majority that is the most important as a part of our nation, as an example, right? And they'll glorify mediocrity. And what that does is it provides the person with a lack of incentive to improve. So essentially, the market is responding to the individual and wanting to ingratiate themselves, but not actually giving them feedback. I call this in other videos the yes man society, where in effect, by getting rid of kings and queens, which is, I personally think that's a good thing, we have democracy, which is great because everybody can be a king or queen. But the problem is, just like a king or queen, when the court is pandering to them and telling them what they want to hear, in a system where we're all consumers, we also see that we're being pandered to. So if we're mediocre, people are just going to tell us to keep being exactly how we are. It's like if you want to date somebody and they have an unhealthy lifestyle and you're just like party, 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 that's usually going to make them like you a lot. And if you want to date someone, you say, hey, maybe you should stop partying, they're like, "Bleh," and you're probably less likely to date them. So you learn over time that whenever you try to help somebody and talk to them about areas they're falling short, they don't tend to reward you, they tend to punish you. We learn this in marketing. In marketing, they tell you, meet the client where they're at. You're not there to educate them or to browbeat them to improve. Just meet them where they're at. If they want to drink a big pile of high fructose corn syrup, create a narrative where that's the cool drink of that country. Tell them how great it is, how it's part of family, and just pander to them. Crazy, right? But conversely, you have collectivist conditioning, which what that's going to do is it's going to glorify submitting to the collective. So they're going to show in the media people who submitted to the collective, and they're like, good for you, give them a pat on the head. And then what they do is they create boogeymen who went against the collective. So it's essentially they'll use either a stooge or a boogeyman. Now, how do they do that? In effect, what they do is they find somebody who, in some way can be represented as scary. And then they just put the spotlight on them and they make them into this cartoon character. There's no complexity, there's no nuance. It goes with that whole movie condition that we've seen since we're a kid. There's the good guys and the bad guys and an ending that reinforces social norms. My firstborn son, Vincent, he has autism. He loves to watch The Smurfs. It's his favorite show. And the Smurf says, there was once in this little land, the Smurfs, they were good. Then there's Gargamel. He was bad. Now, to my autistic son, Vincent, that's very easy to understand. There's a good guy, a bad guy, maybe a crisis, and an ending that reinforces our existing societal values. Funny, right? So we create a boogeyman, we create a bad guy. Why does that work? Because our movie-based conditioning in our youth reinforces that. There was a show recently that got very popular that's actually quite fascinating. It's called Game of Thrones. You've probably seen it. And what was fascinating with Game of Thrones was that A, the hero could die at any moment. That was kind of freaky. Pretty crazy show. But in addition to that, you'd have a character like, say, Jaime Lannister, who at one point is horrible, then becomes good, then becomes horrible, then becomes good, then horrible, then good, and so on and so forth. And it showed that human beings were complex. The majority of people are not all good or all bad. There's not the good guy and the bad guy in most cases. At a certain point, we do have to draw a line in the sand to say that's bad or that's a good thing. There's a point of that. But we tend to oversimplify it, and we see this in media propaganda. So they'll take somebody who is easy to paint a picture in a negative light, and they oversimplify. Now, if that person goes and they go into the media to try to defend themselves, they're not media trained, okay? They are not, if the person who's being turned into a boogeyman goes to the media, there's no media training there. And so what the media person will do is, rather than giving them a real chance to clear their name, they're going to try to ask them clickbait questions, and they're going to hammer them, they're going to overwhelm them. Now, think about this. That media person has been in the media for years, and they're not the ones that their entire ethics are on trial. They're just there being the good virtue signaler, trying to show everyone the deal. Now, this other person trying to defend themselves, completely paranoid, doesn't have media training, and they're being poked on to say things that will attack them, that will get them attacked. That's why we've seen with, say, Jordan Peterson as an example. He just looks angry half the time he's being interviewed because they're trying to get him to say things that are clickbait. And he's about to answer. You'll see this thing. He's like, huh. And you see he's just he's all angry because they know that they're trying to get him to say one thing wrong. And if he were to say one thing wrong, bye-bye. Here comes all the problems that you could ever imagine. And he's been through a lot to try to get his ideas out. Whatever you think of them, that's up to you. That's fine. Have your own opinion on Jordan Peterson. But what you can give him respect for is the fact that he has conviction, and he's going out there and he's being prodded and attacked. He's exhausted after each of these different interviews that he does, but he's trying to help. In his version of the world, he's really trying to help. So, you know, we can poke holes in any set of ideas, but at least he's someone that has conviction. So really, when you think about it, you have that boogeyman. And so again, you get the hero. The hero is somebody who basically submits to the collectivist norms and go, oh, good for you. And they look all kind of confused. They're like, oh, you know, right? And they're showing out like, oh, he did the good thing. And everyone's like, oh. And what's funny is people that are individualists, that don't remotely go by that set of values, will give them the props. It's the funniest thing. Like you'll see some news anchor who's been single their whole life, never got married, and is out there messing around with everybody in the dating pool. But when somebody, say, gets married, they're like, oh, good for you. When in reality, they wouldn't get married themselves. Now, again, I think marriage can be beautiful. Many of my best friends are married. I think marriage is a nod to a lot of powerful tradition. And when you meet the right person with the right education, it can be amazing. But again, like we started off with this video, what happens when you don't have the education of how to balance maintaining attraction while maintaining a friendship, while having a business partnership, while having a love life? There's a lot of complexities, and really the person who doesn't even want to deal with that, they're just dating everybody. It's like, oh, good for you. We really just see this everywhere. That same business owner would give a pat on the head to somebody who goes and gets their life threatened in a war, but they wouldn't necessarily go to war themselves. I think people that defend the country are the most beautiful, amazing people, but I also feel like they can be exploited too. I think there's different sides to it. And again, this is maybe the most uncomfortable video I've ever made. Somewhere in here, I'm sure I've said something wrong and didn't get it, or said something out of step with either a lot of different things, and I apologize for that. I want to preemptively apologize for whatever I said in this video that wasn't on point. I'm trying to get some ideas across here. I'm trying to help you, but I'm going to have gotten some of this wrong, okay? I apologize for whatever I got wrong in this video, and for anything that was interpreted the wrong way or was wrong. Now, what we basically have is, again, that glorification of mediocrity, glorification of submission. It can come from individualists. It can come from collectivists. So really, you're getting hammered from all angles. And and that conditioning again, and it's everything from those angles to the fact that they tell you to go out and party and get drunk and take drugs, and that's fun. Different lifestyles are fun. Different access within a tribe is a good thing. Anything to distract you from what you're really doing here. So in effect, what we have here is exploitation, similar to what a pimp might do to a prostitute. And what does the pimp say to the prostitute? End of the rainbow. End of the rainbow, me and you against the world. You've been misguided and undecided for far too long. You need management, baby. It's that pimping. And you've got to ask yourself, are you being pimped by certain narratives? Now, I think the real solution to all of this is what I said earlier. Myself as a marketer, I understand that if you present somebody with a certain story and market them on that story, they're going to be angry if that story is not what they expected. And I've learned that, and I've adapted to that and done better. But at the same time, I've had it so many times where I'm teaching a course, I realize halfway through the course that I can serve the person in a different way, and I see that the person struggles to let go of it. They struggle because they're so bought into what I'd said earlier. Now, I've learned to adapt and to present what was promised. But understand that it's okay if you've been marketed a story that is not serving you. You can re-examine your stories. And you can look at what stories empower you, give you strength, give you life, give you love, bring you high vibration energy, bring you prosperity, allow you to have vitality, allow you to wake up, and you can examine which stories cause you to be in a stupor. Like I mentioned, some of these stories can cause people even to die. The life is physically, literally sucked out of them. But in many cases, it's this kind of poison dripping where you don't notice what's happening. It's like you're a fish in water and there's water everywhere, so you're not aware of it. What I challenge you to do to wrap up this video is I'd like you to walk down the street and talk to people and ask yourself what memes, what stories have been embedded into their minds, and which one of these are empowering them and which ones of these are harming them. So much of life is being a great neighbor, is being a great friend, is offering value to the world, is doing things that are virtuous, is doing things that are charitable, is having compassion, is having an incredible partner, is defending your country or defending your friends. That is a part of life. And these are some of the most beautiful aspects of life. These are the most important things you'll ever do. Among other things, these are among the most important things you'll do. But at the same time, as we know, low vibration energy, it's like a gunk, it's like a mold, it's everywhere. You have these beautiful trees, but there's also different molds and insects that are eating them. Low vibration energy gets in everything. And it loves anything where there's a vulnerability or anything high leverage where it can create complete destruction. It loves places where there's pure positivity and love and ruining them. This is why we see in horrific incidents that they go after the places that are the most beautiful. That's the instinct of a destructive force. So realize that as you have these vulnerabilities, that you've got to examine them very, very carefully and see if these are things that are empowering you or depleting you of life. And we have a great future. This conversation that we have ongoing together, I think that we're going to go to incredible places. And that's not going to be with me telling you how to live, but that's going to be us having a conversation about real critical thinking. I don't want you to just take my opinion. I want you to be a critical thinker. I'm trying to show you a thought process because, like I said, part of what I've talked about in our conversation here is not on point. That's okay. I can't be right about everything. I've done a lot of research, but I cannot be right about everything. So what we want to do is we want to look at that critical thinking process. We want to get you thinking on your feet because that's what scares them. You know that you can think on your feet, because notice every vulnerability is in areas that you don't fully understand or areas that seem too heavy. So we need to both teach you how to critically think, but also to embrace some of the challenges of life. We got to get you to embrace your freedom, embrace your self-reliance, embrace the fact that you're not a victim. No matter what's happened to you, by the way, don't care what it is. Don't care. You're not a victim. If you need to say it. I'm not a victim. Say it as many times as you need to until you wake up and notice how the energy changes around you. So that's our journey together. Critical thinking, awareness, filling those vulnerabilities, building strength, attaching ourselves onto areas that we can be strong. Going forward, I'm going to talk to you about a lot of the larger aspects of life that I think that we've been distracted from with all of this. I want to talk to you about your deepest potentials. I want to talk to you about the most profound aspects of life and just things that I found that helped me as far as unearthing potentials that I never knew I had and that I don't think most people know they have, and a potential that I see in you that I don't think You know that you have. So I hope that you've enjoyed today's video. It's amazing, amazing for me to be out here in the redwoods. It's a moment I'm never going to forget. And that's why I want to come here, and I want to share it with you. So take it in. We're lucky. We're very, very lucky. I started this video by saying that I love you. I care for you. And we're going to go far. You don't need me to do it. We're going to work together as a team. This is a journey. This is our odyssey. And it's just getting started. I'll be back more soon.